So can everybody hear me all right in the back? Raise your hand if you can't hear me very well. Oh, you can hear me. Okay, so my name is Jim Semick. I am co-founder of a company called ProductCamp. I'm going to give you a couple of things here today that will hopefully help with product road mapping based on our experience. I'm going to not give you something today, and one of those things I'm not going to give you is a demo of ProductCamp. So this is not a pitch about the product. This is really about the experience that we've had interacting with hundreds of product managers about product road mapping. So I can give you some of those tips and best practices. You know, rather than this being a presentation where it's simply a one-way dialogue, I'd really like to have some interactivity here. And I'll tell you a little bit about my background just for a couple of minutes, and then maybe I could turn it over to you, and I'd like to hear what you would like to get out of this. Because my presentation is fairly wide-ranging, and I cover both product road mapping, the process of figuring out what goes on the product road mapping, and I have parts on the roadmap itself, that actual document, that artifact that you create. And so we can talk about both aspects, but I'd like to get a feeling from you about what you'd like to cover. So my background is that I've been in product management and new product development for about 15 years. I kind of got thrown into it or kicked into it about 15 years ago. I was working for a company, I'm based out of Santa Barbara, and the company was a startup, and I went to work for this startup, and $10 million was spent developing this product and launching it to the world, and then we launched the product, and on launch day, we heard crickets. Literally, we saw it was a consumer level product, and the money was just trickling in tens of dollars at a time. And so we had a major, major miss. And we knew that we needed to pivot. So the founder of the company came to me and said, I have this idea for a screen sharing product, a remote screen sharing product. You know, how do we know that this is going to work? And so we did a lot of research into, you know, how do we validate that we actually have a market if we build something? And so we called this product Easy Remote Control, and I went out and did the you know, market validation for it and wrote the product requirements for the product that became GoToMyPC. So I was the first product manager for GoToMyPC, and then later for GoToMeeting and a lot of the GoTo products. And so that was my first foray into product management, and since then I've been working for startups, and I've also consulted for a number of products in new product development. And with our latest product, I'm interacting with a lot of product managers, and I gotta say, I love working with product managers because you are really great at helping us define our product, and you understand MVP, and you understand prioritization, and so on. So it's really wonderful. So let's start by, maybe I could have a couple of people explain to me or just tell me what you want to get out of this session. Maybe you could, if I could have a couple of hands raised, what do you guys want to, at the end of this, what do you want to hear? Okay, that sounds good. So the comment was about focus and stability in the product roadmap. And you're not going to be able to read this, but I understand it. Okay, good. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
Recommendations on how best to present to the CEO, to the board of directors.
Okay, so executive, how do you communicate and present to the CEO and other execs? Okay, so you're talking about that actual document that you present to them.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the board meeting. How best to wow them?
Okay, perfect, perfect. Yeah?
Promote, like, similar to that, promote visibility and transparency of the roadmap versus the organization.
Visibility, okay, good. So visibility to the organization. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yes? How much detail? Level of detail. Mm-hmm.
The feature.
Okay. Okay, good, thank you. Yes?
I'll say methodologies for validating assumptions or perceived values.
Okay. And validating with customers or validating with internal stakeholders? Okay, so the comment was about how do you figure out how to validate your assumptions? Okay, very good. Okay, a couple more? Yes?
Managing expectations.
Okay. Managing expectations, do you mean the dates that are assigned to initiatives, or, okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, anyone else? Yes?
Is there like a one roadmap, or do you have to kind of create different communication tools for different audiences? Like
Perfect.
engineers need to see the roadmap versus
Uh-huh.
CEO?
Perfect, okay. Yeah, no, that's great. So the question is, or the comment is, do we create different roadmaps for different audiences, and then how do you do that? Perfect. Okay, so what I'd like to do is start to go through the presentation here. A lot of what you are talking about here is very much part of the discussion today. And as we go through this, I'd like this to be more interactive. I'd like it to be more like a town hall meeting or something like that, again, rather than a one-way communication. And then we'll make sure and leave some time on the clock here for some questions. So maybe for the next 20 or 25 minutes, we'll go through this, and hopefully we'll get some good interaction going. So in product management, I've seen personally and through discussions with customers this dysfunction that happens with roadmaps. And what happens, especially as an organization grows, especially as the product portfolio grows, and you bring in additional product managers into the team, the strategic objectives start to become a little more fuzzy. And there's often confusion internally about the roadmap. There's confusion about, which one's the current roadmap. If there's a new release that's released, you get questions from these stakeholders saying, we talked about this. Why wasn't this part of the release? There's also, in some organizations, a lack of transparency. So the product owner or the product manager sometimes, especially if they're under the gun, might be making decisions unilaterally. And so I don't know if anybody's seen this happen before, but why did we do that? And often you'll find the symptom of this is that the executive, the sales VP, or the marketing VP will come to you and say, why did we do that? And the other thing that I've seen is that the process and the roadmaps are not unified across the organization. So the process for road mapping and prioritization and decision making is not consistent from product to product or department to department or division to division. And this is another issue that happens. You wind up with these different documents all in different formats with different axes and different swim lanes and different date styles. And as a result, there's confusion in the organization. And so that's an issue. Am I on the right track here? Have you guys heard this sort of thing? Lack of consistency when evaluating opportunities. There's often not a standardized way of evaluating different opportunities. And I'm not talking about turning product management into a machine. Obviously there is product management is an art. And there are these different processes that we can use to figure out what the right thing is to build. But if you have different product managers using different methods and strategies, that can cause a little bit confusion in the organization, especially if an executive is speaking to the product management team and asking how they came to a decision on something. And the other thing that we've seen often is that executives, they tend to focus on the weeds. They tend to focus on that one feature that they really have to have as part of the release. And the other thing is that a dysfunction that we see is that a decision has been made and a product has been built, yet the executives are not on board with that. And so I want to talk about some things that we can do to change this. But before I do that, does anybody have anything you want to add to this? Any other dysfunction that has to do with product strategy or product road mapping that anybody wants to add to it? Yeah?
Well, I think it's interesting you didn't mention anything about how sales guys sell the roadmap.
Yes.
And how oftentimes by the time they're done selling it, it's already changed.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and that so the comment was about how sales guys are selling the roadmap. And there are some organizations and some philosophies that believe that we never let a salesperson get a hold of a roadmap, obviously, because then it becomes, it becomes part of a sales agreement, or it gets put in front of a customer or sent around an email. When in an agile world, we know that things are changing. Things are changing, monthly or quarterly at the minimum. So that's a real problem. And there is a way of communicating with sales reps about what's coming. And so there's a certain level of detail, or rather not a certain level of detail, and there's not a certain level of date commitment that we can put into roadmaps that makes it so that we can share this information with salespeople and the sales organization without getting ourselves into hot water. So let's talk a little bit about the audience. And what we've seen from organizations is that they will often create artifacts and documents for different audiences. So if the audience is an executive, they will often create a product roadmap document that is extremely high level. And they will associate the initiatives on that roadmap with the company's strategic initiatives or the company's strategic goals. And so what we've seen that works very effectively is be crafting a roadmap that is designed for the executive audience. And in our experience, this is the biggest pain point right here. We all use tools, I suspect, whether it's Jira or Rally or Pivotal Tracker or tools like that manage the backlog. They manage the tasks that go into the products that we're building. But those tools are not very effective when it comes to the roadmap document. We've seen companies that often try to bubble up a roadmap from those underlying tools, from the tools that you use to execute the roadmap. Does that make sense? Has anybody ever tried to do that? Has anybody ever tried to, okay, so we have some that you might take the stories and then, well, those bubble up into epics, and then those somehow bubble up into themes, and then I'm kind of backwards. I'm kind of filling in my roadmap working backwards. And the challenge with that is that you will, as we heard this morning, you will not be able to see around the corner as well. If you're simply executing on the roadmap or the backlog that you have today, and you're bubbling up the roadmap from that, you're not thinking strategically, you're not thinking ahead as much. And so creating executive-facing roadmaps in itself is a great process for you to have, because you're thinking very high level. And I'll give you an example of what a roadmap like that can look like. So you can also have roadmaps that are engineering facing. We have customers today that are creating a separate roadmap using separate terminology, using separate swim lanes, using even a sprint timeline that they use to communicate to the executive team, or I'm sorry, the engineering team about what's coming next. Because engineers can just as easily, or even more so, get lost in the weeds with what it is they're building, and it's really helpful for them, and it helps build their engagement in the product if you can create a big, high-level facing roadmap for them. Sales and customers. We have customers today that are creating customer-facing roadmaps and then sharing those roadmaps with those customers. And what they're doing is they are using a very non-date-driven roadmap. So on some of these roadmaps, and by the way, when I say that I've seen roadmaps and I've talked with our customers about this, our tool, for security reasons, we can't actually see your roadmap. The only way that we can see your product roadmap is if you explicitly share it with us, or we do a go-to meeting or something like that. So we take the privacy very, very seriously. But so they create these customer-facing roadmaps, take off the dates for it, and then create very high-level roadmap initiatives that the customers then see. So now you're sharing with the customers kind of the direction of the product, rough prioritization of when this initiative is going to be happening, but you're not putting a commitment down. Okay. Any questions about roadmaps for different audiences? And I have a couple of examples later. Yeah?
I know you don't want to talk about feedback, but for those 3 customers, it seems like your roadmap is going to be different. It seems like a lot of overhead to be building one for each of those 3 of those.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so today, if you want to have different initiatives on the roadmap, you do need to build three different roadmaps. But we have features that let you copy roadmaps and other features that we have a theme feature that lets you kind of roll up initiatives. And so you might present the details to a different audience and then the high-level roll-up to a different audience. So there are ways of working around that. So the question was, you wind up building 3 different roadmaps, and that's a lot of overhead. Yeah. So, however, I will point out that one of the key things you do as a product manager is communicate and sell your vision. And to be able to get the engineering team on board and the sales team on board, and most importantly, the executive team on board with your vision is really an important part of your job. The other thing I'll point out is that we see a lot of roadmaps where people put a lot of detail into the roadmap. And what we've seen works very effectively, and the feedback that we've heard is that if you keep your roadmap and your dates at a very high level, your roadmap is much more effective, and you're able to change. You're able to change your the detailed stories that are underneath it, because it's inevitable that it's going to be changing. And that's why I encourage people to think in themes. So rather than thinking about the individual story at the story level and putting that onto the roadmap, you're grouping things together into themes that add value for customers. Okay, so if you think about I saw a blog post just recently where they talked about chunks of value, and I really like that concept because you're able to kind of switch things in and out of that theme without really affecting the roadmap.